recording.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Jen Tremin, and I am with the Atlanta BeltLine Partnership. If you're not familiar with us, we are the nonprofit entity for the Atlanta BeltLine. So tonight you are joining us for one of our home empowerment workshops, and these are free workshops that we put on with partners to help you be more secure in your home, whether you are a renter or a homeowner. So tonight I'm happy to be back with Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation, who has joined us a few times over the course of the year to give us an update on the status of evictions with the pandemic. And tonight we're going to learn more about the current status of the CDC moratorium and what you can do to prepare when that ends currently on March 31st of this month. So before we begin, just a couple things to note. You will be able to ask our presenters questions throughout the session. Just use the Q&A feature and we'll get to as many as we can. And then afterwards, you'll receive a survey. If you could please take a couple seconds to fill that out, it really does help inform our programming and what types of topics that we offer during these workshops. So also it's being recorded and you guys will get a copy of that at the end for you to refer back to. So without further ado, I will turn it over to my friends at the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation to tell us more.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. Thank you for doing this very important eviction Know Your Rights and update about what's going on with the moratorium. I'm going to go ahead and I need to share my screen. And then Darius, if you will, I'm Ayanna Jones-Lightsey with Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation. I'm the co-director of the Safe and Stable Homes Project. Darius, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Darius Woods. I am a staff attorney with the Standing with Our Neighbors Project, and I work at West Side Neighborhoods. Tosin and Patricio, if you all want to introduce yourselves.
Hey everyone, this is Patricio with the Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation of Community Assistance Team, Community Assistance Advocate.
Hey guys, doing? My name is Tosin Ogloinki. I'm on the Community Assistance Team as well.
All right, so first we want to do a little bit of introduction about who we are. But Darius, you're the opener with the CDC moratorium information, so I'm gonna let you take it away. Okay,
sounds good. And everyone, before we get started, we just want to see who is in the room or in the virtual room. So I'm about to launch a poll, and our first poll question is who's joining tonight's webinar. So the poll is launched. If you could please complete the poll question. I'll give everyone about a minute. Okay, about 30 more seconds. Or maybe sooner. It seems like almost everyone has completed the poll. Okay, so we'll show the results. It seems like we have a good amount of tenants here, 27%, and a lot of nonprofit and community organizations. So this is good to know. We just wanted to get a snapshot of who we're talking to today. So I'm going to go into a little bit about our mission. Our mission is create safe and stable families by, sorry, I had to get that poll off my screen, by inspiring the fight for equal justice. So we work in a variety of ways. We have two main programs. Our first program is called our Safe and Stable Homes Program. And under that program, that's Ayanna's program, which is the Standing with Our Neighbors program. And we also have the Saturday Lawyer Program, Eviction Defense Program, and a myriad of other programs that fall under that umbrella. On the opposite side, we have our Safe and Stable Families Program. And that program works with partners and survivors of intimate partner abuse. And like I said, our goal is to provide free legal services, quality legal services to Fulton County residents, so they, get a safe and more equitable environment. So our agenda for today is, first, we're going to start off with the CDC moratorium because I know people have questions about that. And then we're going to go over your rights as a renter. And then we're going to understand the eviction process. And then lastly, we're going to kick it off with or end it with Tosin and Patricio about rental assistance programs that are available. And before we get started, I have another poll because we want to know, what are you hoping to learn from this session? So I'm relaunching. You should see a poll question. I'll leave this one open for about 30 seconds. What are you hoping to learn?
And just to give you a little bit more information about ABLF, we've been in the Atlanta area for over 40 years. And what we do is we work with private law firms and help them take on cases to represent tenants all over Atlanta. And our Standing with Our Neighbors program specifically is a pilot that was started in 2016, and it's launched in 3 major neighborhoods in Atlanta, 9 Atlanta public schools, to help fight the eviction and hopefully the high level of transiency in these areas.
Exactly. So I'm gonna end the polling there because I feel like everyone, and I'll share these results real quick. Some people want to know about the CDC ban, but it looks like most people want to know about everything, which is great because we want to teach you about everything. So let's get started on the next slide. So I'm going to start off talking about the CDC moratorium. So you all might have learned already that the CDC moratorium is set to expire at the end of this month. The CDC moratorium, eviction moratorium, was originally passed, the regulation was made on September 4th of last year, 2020, and it's set to expire on March 31st, 2021. Now, we are hoping that the CDC moratorium is extended even past this date, but we just don't have any information right now to update you in terms of a possible extension. But the CDC moratorium was launched to protect any tenants who are facing eviction due to non-payment of rent. And in order to qualify or be eligible under the CDC moratorium, you have to complete a declaration. Now, the CDC moratorium declaration could be found on the CDC's website. A lot of nonprofit organizations around Atlanta have also published a CDC declaration on their websites. You can find it on our website at avlf.org/evictions. And in order to qualify for the CDC eviction moratorium, you have to affirm, one, that you make less than $99,000 if you're filing single, or $198,000 if you're filing jointly. In addition to that, you must declare that you are unable to pay rent due to loss of income or extraordinary medical expenses. So just remember, there are 5 requirements, and those are the first 2. The third requirement is you must attest that you will become homeless, or you would need to double up with a relative or a friend or anyone if you were evicted. The fourth qualification is that you still may make partial payments, and you're encouraged to make partial payments to the best of your ability. So if there's any income a tenant has left over outside of mandatory expenses, then they are expected to make a partial payment under the CDC moratorium. And lastly, you must have applied, or a tenant must have applied to all government assistance programs available during this health emergency. And we'll get more into that. But from my experience, a good amount of tenants have applied. You don't have to necessarily be granted rental assistance, just have applied. So just keep in mind, those are the 5 qualifications. And on the CDC declaration form, which I believe we have a picture of the actual affidavit, this is what the affidavit looks like. And basically, you just read over it, review. Be sure that the tenant qualifies. If you're a tenant, that you qualify or under all these standards. We don't want you to go and sign a CDC declaration if you aren't eligible. And we'll get more into that, why you don't want to do that. And if you can go to the previous slide real quick. So just to recap on the CDC moratorium, it only applies for non-payment of rent. So if a tenant is being evicted for another reason, such as violation of lease term because a tenant had a dog and the complex didn't allow dogs, that wouldn't be covered under the CDC eviction moratorium. You also want to remember that it expires on March 31st of 2021. It requires the tenant to complete the declaration and send it to their landlord. So unlike the CARES Act, which was passed March of last year, a little over a year ago, that automatically applied. The tenant didn't have to make an affirmative act, but under the CDC declaration, the tenant does have to affirmatively give the declaration to its landlord. It allows for partial payment, and keep in mind, if you're a tenant, a lot of landlords might reject partial payments. And if a landlord rejects your partial payment, even if you're attempting to make that partial payment, what I would do is send something in writing showing that you attempted to make a partial payment. That could be an email, that could be a text message to just say, hey, landlord, I tried to make this payment in the amount of blank and you would not accept it. Just to keep something in writing that you attempted to make partial payments. So if it comes up later in a hearing, you at least have something in writing. It's also important to keep in mind that even with the CDC declaration, a tenant still owes the amount of back unpaid rent. So this is not, the CDC eviction moratorium is not a rent forgiveness program. It's really just deferring an eviction. So tenants can get all eligible rental assistance that they are eligible for, and kind of figure out how they can catch up on back rent. So it's not rent forgiveness. It is only going to postpone the actual eviction, the writ of possession. So, and this is where you have to sign the CDC declaration saying that, there are no false statements, you're not making false statements, and that you're eligible for the CDC eviction moratorium. So I'm just going to briefly go over some frequently asked questions about the CDC moratorium, just in case people have questions. Before I start, I do want to note that the Fulton County Magistrate Court is holding hearings, eviction hearings, whether or not a tenant submitted the CDC declaration. So if you are scheduled for a hearing and you're a tenant, you still have the obligation to attend your dispossessory hearing. And if you have not received notice of a hearing yet, it may be coming soon. The Fulton County Court, they're hearing cases. This is not like it was during the summer and in March where none of the courts were open. Most cases are virtual, but they're also doing in-person hearings. What the court is doing, however, is at the hearing, if you have submitted the CDC declaration, they are staying the writ of possession until the CDC moratorium expires. And what that means is the writ of possession, normally a tenant would have 7 days to move after a hearing if they lose at that hearing, because a writ of possession would be issued. Now the court is not issuing an immediate writ of possession. They're waiting until April 1st to issue the writ of possession. So frequently asked questions, do I need to prove my financial hardship is related to COVID-19? No, a tenant has no obligation to prove that financial hardship is related to COVID-19. It only requires that you have a financial hardship. That's all. You don't have to provide additional proof. Can my landlord make me provide proof of my financial hardship? No, your landlord cannot make you provide proof. They can't make you provide proof of an unemployment letter or some medical expenses. However, what a landlord can do is they can object to the declaration if they believe that you've said something untruthful in the declaration. Now, this is unlikely because a tenant would know more about, their eligibility under the CDC declaration than a landlord will. But keep that in mind when it comes to signing the declaration to make sure it's accurate. If there are multiple adults in my house, do all of us need to fill out a CDC declaration? So we recommend, yes, each adult that's on the leasing agreement should sign and provide their own declaration to the landlord. So adults on the lease agreement should, however, one declaration should be sufficient. So if you're a tenant on this call right now and you're worried because you only submitted one CDC declaration, that should be okay. But we recommend anyone who's submitting a new CDC declaration, each adult on the lease should sign. Next question is, should I still pay rent? Yes, you should still pay as much of your rent as possible in order to continue meeting the qualifications under the CDC moratorium. And also keep in mind, as I mentioned on the previous slide, that tenants will have to pay back this money when the CDC moratorium expires. So it's only in a tenant's best interest to pay as much rent as they can, so they're not even further behind when the CDC moratorium expires.
And I'm sorry, Darius, if I could just jump in. Even if the landlord doesn't take it, you should still save it, because at the end of the day, you will end up owing as a tenant all of that rent. We don't recommend that you spend it unless, of course, there's an emergency. But if possible, even if the landlord will not take it, save it, because it can help you later, and it may be able to be added to any additional amounts of assistance that you can be given to cover the total amount of your back rent.
Yes, excellent point, Ion. Yes, please don't spend it if you can avoid it. Next question is, if the judge already issued a writ of possession, can I stop the eviction with the CDC declaration? Yes. So if you or a tenant who's already been to court and they didn't submit the CDC declaration prior to their hearing date, and now they want to submit a CDC declaration because a writ of possession has been issued, that the declaration should still stop the writ of possession from moving forward. All the tenant needs to do is show the sheriff's office that they submitted a copy of the declaration to their landlord, and the Fulton County Sheriff specifically should not move forward with taking possession of the property. Now, I can't say for all the other counties, but I know in Fulton County, the Fulton County Sheriff's Office should not move forward with an eviction. And the last frequently asked question, what if my landlord ignores the declaration and tries to evict me? So as I mentioned before, a landlord can still file an eviction even if you submitted the CDC declaration. However, a landlord cannot remove you from the property prior to the expiration of the CDC eviction moratorium. If a landlord tries to remove a tenant from the property prior to the expiration of the CDC moratorium, we advise that tenant to call the police because that would be an illegal eviction. As I mentioned, all writ of possessions are stayed until the CDC eviction moratorium expires. So if a writ of possession is stayed, that means the landlord cannot move forward with taking possession of the property. And the landlord might be liable under the CDC moratorium. The CDC moratorium states that a landlord may be fined up to $100,000 and 1 year in jail, or both, if they violate the CDC moratorium. So if this is happening, please contact your local legal aid. You can contact AVLF or the Atlanta Legal Aid Society, Georgia Legal Services. Contact a legal aid organization because that would be wrongful conduct. So that's all we have about the CDC eviction moratorium. Feel free to, we do have some more polling questions. I'm really into this polling feature thing. So just to do a quick recap. first question is, when is the CDC eviction moratorium currently expected to expire? Okay, we'll give it 5 more seconds. Okay, so I don't even have to share that poll because everybody said 100%. So that's great that we're all on the same page. The CDC eviction moratorium is set to expire on March 31st. And if it expires, if it's extended, we'll try to get out the word the best way we can. The next question is, well, actually, that might be the only question. There we go. So I'll pass it over to Ayam.
Thank you, Darius. And if you don't mind checking, I see we have some questions in the Q&A. So feel free to either interrupt me or answer in the Q&A those questions. So I'm going to talk about your rights as a renter and what you need to know, because often in our work, we find that people aren't fully informed about what your landlord's basic obligations are and what are your obligations as a tenant. So the landlord is obligated under Georgia law, has a duty to repair. That means the landlord must maintain the premises in habitable conditions. And if the landlord provided you with appliances when you initially moved into the unit, they are obligated to replace them. That includes the refrigerator, the stove, the air conditioning, all those kinds of things that came with the apartment. The landlord has an obligation to return your security deposit within 30 days of you moving out, or they must send an accounting of why they kept the security deposit and what charges they made against the security deposit. That's why it's really important for you when you move out to provide the landlord with a forwarding address so that you can either get this accounting or get the actual security deposit. If the landlord is seeking to evict you, they must provide notice and demand. There must be a demand for possession made before an eviction is filed. Now that demand can look like, it's not clear that the demand needs to be specifically in writing. However, usually a text message, a letter, a notice, something to let you know that they are demanding possession and why they're demanding possession. In addition, there are the rules around non-discrimination and disclosure. They must not discriminate on the basis of race, gender, or disability. And they must disclose pre-existing damage, flooding perhaps in the basement in the last 5 years, and the presence of lead-based paint. All of the failure to disclose these things is a violation of the law. Additionally, if you live in subsidized housing, landlords have to comply with HUD's additional regulations around maintaining the property. What are your obligations as a tenant? You must comply with the lease. I know that the lease can be long and can be filled with a lot of legalese, but it is important that you read the lease or have someone read it to you and at least get a basic understanding of what you're agreeing to. Additionally, there's usually addendums that talk about what is considered a violation. So things like subleasing, letting your cousin stay there and pay in your place or pay you and then you pay, that's a sublease. And if your lease says there's no subleasing, then that is a violation. So make sure that you are reading and paying close attention to all of those things, including any monies that you may owe if you break or violate your lease. If your property is in need of repairs, you need to notify the landlord promptly, and we recommend you do it in writing. Again, text message, mail, call, screenshot, something that notifies your landlord that you have some repair issues, preferably something with a date on it. And again, if that just means you writing on a piece of paper and noting the date when you gave the landlord a letter, that's important. Also, when you move out, you should complete a move out checklist. Even if the landlord doesn't provide it to you, you can download move out checklists fairly easily from the internet. Why is this important? Because too often we see cases where the landlord is claiming something was broken by the tenant, and the tenant is claiming, no, that was broken before, or I notified you of that. And when I moved out, these were the conditions. Take pictures. Please take pictures, lots of pictures, and hold on to those pictures, because you never know if those pictures will come in handy in proving that you did not damage the unit, that all the conditions were met when you moved out, so that you can get your security deposit back. Additionally, return any keys to the landlord when you move out. Holding on to your keys may be considered you holding over, and it may obligate you to pay things like prorated rent for the time that you held on to those keys. So you heard Darius talk about several terms, including writ of possession. I'm going to go over eviction basics and what is the process. If you haven't heard of Matthew Desmond, he is someone working out of Princeton who is doing amazing work around eviction and housing insecurity. And this is one of his quotes that I think speaks very well to why eviction is such a problem. Eviction's fallout is severe. Losing a home sends families to shelters, abandoned houses, and the street. It invites depression and illness and compels families to move into degrading housing in dangerous neighborhoods. It uproots communities and harms children. Eviction reveals people's vulnerability and desperation, as well as their ingenuity and their guts. So eviction is not just about losing your house. You lose your foundational supports. And so it's important that we know the process and can arm ourselves. The first thing you need to know is that Georgia does not allow self-help evictions. Under no circumstances can a landlord evict a tenant without a court order. During the eviction process, the tenant is allowed to remain in possession of the property. That means no changing the locks, no putting the tenant's items on the street, no cutting off of the utilities, no boarding up of the windows. We've seen a myriad of things. The landlord must have a court order in order to lawfully evict a tenant. Without that court order, there's no self-help evictions. The first step in an eviction process is a demand. The landlord must demand that the tenant give up possession. It's best when it's done in writing, but there is no magic language that must be used. And sometimes the demand won't say it's a demand. It'll say things like, you, the tenant, are notified that you have violated or failed to perform the terms of the lease, and you must surrender and vacate. It can say language like notice of termination of your lease, demand for possession. It can say a wide variety of things, but as long as it clearly lays out that there's been a violation and that the landlord is demanding physical possession, it is a demand. Private landlords sometimes use different language than subsidized housing, but it still amounts to the same thing. In some subsidized housing, not all, the notice will also give the tenant a right to request an informal conference. We always recommend that tenants do that and request it in writing so that you have a chance to go before, theoretically, a third-party neutral mediator to explain your case and present your evidence. After the demand is given, the landlord must file what's known as a dispossessory warrant under oath in magistrate court. That is the official start of the court proceedings. And the warrant has some specifications. It must state the name of the tenant, should not say all parties living at. It should be very specific because it's based on the lease. So the names on the lease are important. If they're not there, that's going to be a problem. The warrant must also state the reason the tenant is being removed. Especially in subsidized housing, that language has to match the demand letter that you were given. So for instance, if the landlord states in the demand letter that they are evicting you because of a violation of the lease, But then that same subsidized housing landlord states on the warrant, the dispossessory warrant, which we also call has been called the eviction notice, that the reason is for non-payment of rent. Those are two different violations of the lease, and there may be some wiggle room in there. The landlord also has to verify that he or she demanded possession of the premises and that it was removed, and it should state the exact amount of rent or other money owed. After filing the dispossessory based on non-payment of rent specifically, the landlord cannot accept rent for the tenant, or this will give you a defense. So if you do in fact pay your rent after you are served with a dispossessory warrant, please keep copies, receipts, some sort of documentation so that if and when you go to court, you can state that the landlord accepted rent from you after you were served with a dispossessory warrant. If the landlord is willing to accept the rent and dismiss this action, then it should be in writing. You don't want to think that someone will scam you, but you want to make sure you're as protected as possible. So this is an example of a dispossessory warrant. And again, we get calls all the time where people say, I got served with an eviction. If it is not an official court document that resembles this, then it is not valid. More than likely, it is not valid. There are some specific things that need to be claimed and filed, and it needs to be served on you, which I will talk about shortly, in a particular kind of way. Just giving you a letter that says you're evicted is not sufficient. The next step after the landlord files the eviction is service. There are three main ways that you can be served. One is that you can be personally served by a sheriff or an agent of the sheriff. That's when they come to your door and they will hand deliver it to you, or a competent adult who lives in the household. It cannot be a minor. We all know how our children lose things, forget about things, just don't pay attention. It has to be a competent adult who lives in the minor, which means that if you happen to live with a senior who may be suffering from dementia or some other condition that renders them incompetent under the law, it cannot be served on that person either. It must be a competent adult. As I've stated here, it's personal on another adult in the house, not a minor. And it should only be used on this other adult if the tenant or someone else is not at home. The third method is tack and mail. This is a method that we run into a lot of problems with because it's not an actual tack put on your door. It's usually taped to your door, slid into the cracks or the crevice, and it can blow away. And this, who can prove it, right? If the landlord put it on the door and it blew away, they didn't stay there to watch it and you didn't see it when you came home. But typically this method is only supposed to be used if the tenant or someone competent is not at home. So tack and mail is an alternative, and it also has to be mailed via first-class mail as well. Once the tenant receives a copy of the dispossessory warrant and the summons, then the tenant must file an answer. And I say must in quotes, again, with lawyer speak. The tenant has 7 days to file an answer, and it's 7 full days after service of the warrant. If the 7th day falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or a legal holiday, the answer is required on the next day that is not a Saturday, a Sunday, or a legal holiday. When you get served with the dispossessory warrant, it will tell you at the bottom what is the last day that you have to answer. Let's see if I put it in the, yes, okay. So if you look at this document, you can see on the bottom, on the right-hand side, defendant to answer on or before. Pay attention to that date. If you fail to file your answer by that date, the landlord can then go back to the court and ask for a writ of possession. A writ of possession is the document that gives the sheriffs, the marshals, the authority to remove the tenant. So it is very important that if you intend to fight this or stay on the premises, you need to file, the tenant needs to file an answer on time. There are very few exceptions given to that rule. So please pay attention. You can file in person at the downtown Fulton County Magistrate Court County Clerk's office or electronically. And again, the dispossessory warrant will tell you how to file electronically. I will tell you there is a fee associated with filing electronically, and they ask you to create an account. And that can be daunting. So if you can, go and file your answer in person. Additionally, ABLF operates the Housing Court Assistance Center, which is located in the same space as the clerk's office. So there is an attorney there several days a week who can attempt to answer your questions about this dispossessory warrant and maybe help you file an answer.
And just to cut in, I just want to clarify the HCAC system is courthouse is open Monday through Wednesday from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. So just make sure if you are seeking assistance to HCAC, you arrive Monday through Wednesday, 9 to noon.
Thank you. Yes, they're very helpful there, and they do see a lot of tenants. This is an example of what an answer looks like. You can get this answer form at the courthouse. They have blank copies, and then you will be able to file your answer. There are several pieces here that you need to look at. The first part is what's your actual answer? What's your rebuttal to the landlord filing? One is the plaintiff is not my landlord. You definitely want to check that you are the defendant and filing an answer. If none of your names, if the name is incorrect, you are not the person that it's being served against, you want to check that and make sure, because you may not be the defendant, in which case you want to file down at the bottom where it says other. Some other reasons that you can put to fight an answer is that the person filing it is not actually your landlord. We've seen that before, and that you as the tenant have attempted to demand proof that they're your landlord, which is completely understandable. You don't want to be paying a large chunk of your money to someone who is not actually your landlord. A next argument to be made is my landlord did not give me proper notice that my lease or rental agreement was terminated in accordance with the terms of our lease. This is again that proper notice and proper demand that we were talking about later. Another one is my landlord terminated my lease without a valid reason. This is why it's important to read your lease, because your lease will lay out the majority of reasons for which your landlord can terminate your lease. The next one is you do not owe any rent to your landlord. The next is you offered and had the money to pay your rent on or before the date you usually pay, but you refuse to accept. And it's similar to the next one, which is that your landlord would not accept any rent. This goes to the tender defense, that you have attempted to tender your rent and it was refused. The next one is that your landlord failed to repair the property, and because of that failure, it's lowered its value. We do not, under any circumstances, recommend that you withhold your rent because of repairs. Georgia is not one of those states that allows you to withhold your rent because the property is not repaired. You can still be evicted. So it's very important that we do not recommend withholding your rent. And then if there are some additional reasons that you find valid that you want to put in here in your defense. But again, you definitely want to make sure you check one or two of these other boxes, even if you also fill out the other. Because if you do not, there's a chance you will end up on a calendar that's called the judgment on the pleadings, which means you have not given the court a good reason to not evict you. And so when you come to court on the day of your hearing, you and several other people will be told that you did not make a good defense and that the landlord is being granted what they're asked for, and that a writ will issue and you must leave the home in 7 days. The second part of this is something that tenants sometimes leave out, but we think is a valid argument and claim to make. This is a counterclaim. If somehow your landlord owes you money, if the landlord said, why don't you pay for the plumbing and I'll take it from your rent, right? I'll deduct it from your rent, in writing, hopefully. Or if your landlord failed to repair the property and the value has been reduced. So if there was flooding and you were unable to use your bathroom for several months, that means you didn't get what you bargained for. You're paying for rent for all the use of the whole space. And if you don't have use of that space, you want to make the judge aware of that. Also, if the landlord failed to make requested repairs, there is a process called repair and deduct. But you have to notify the landlord that, 1, there's a problem. 2, this is the estimated cost of that repairing that issue. 3, if it is not repaired by a date certain, 2 or 3 weeks out, you will be forced to make the repair and deduct that amount from the rent. This is very tricky and can get you into some trouble. So if you don't do it correctly. So if you do in fact decide to do that, keep all of your documents and all of your receipts. But typically, if you don't keep all of that, you can find yourself owing money. So just be very, very careful. And finally, my landlord's failure to repair resulted in damages to my person and or my property. If the flooding resulted in you losing all of your clothes, if the failure to repair the refrigerator resulted in your food spoiling, and you had spent $200 or $300 on groceries that are now no good to you, these are the types of things that can happen when a landlord fails to repair the property, and you want to make sure you assert that and hopefully have some receipts about that. Once you file your answer, then you will be scheduled for a hearing. If you cannot attend that hearing and you have a valid reason, the tenant should request a motion for continuance as soon as possible. These are not guaranteed, though, to be granted. So what you need to do is contact the clerk's office. You need to find out who the judge is for that day if they know. You need to try to contact that judge's office. You need to put whatever you can in writing. For people's excuses include, I have major surgery that I have to have on that day. Sometimes someone is sick, or there are a wide variety of reasons, but the court is very strict about granting any type of motion for continuance. So please, if you are served and you get a hearing date, do your best to attend the hearing. We've heard horror stories and we've seen horror stories where people send someone in their place because they couldn't get off of work. And the judge said, you're not the person on this document. I will not hear the argument. And unless the tenant shows up, I'm going to fine for the landlord. So be very, very diligent about trying to attend this hearing. There are dispossessory hearings. Well, pre-COVID, there were dispossessory hearings scheduled every day of the week. And 2 of those days, there is a set of hearings that are for tenants that did not assert proper tenants. These tenants will not have a hearing, and the judge will tell them they need to leave their home within 7 days. You do not want to end up on this calendar. You want to do your best to file an answer that allows you to at least get in front of the judge. In Fulton County, mediation is available for up to 2 hours if the tenants want to attend. And what happens is the landlords go into a room with a mediator and try to reach some kind of agreement. What I cannot stress enough is that if you agree to something and sign it and the judge signs off on this, there is no appeal. There's no buyer's remorse. You can't come back the next day and say, I changed my mind. You are stuck with what you agreed to. So I tell tenants, stop it. I tell tenants, please, please, please do not agree. Just go in front of the judge and have your day in court rather than agree to pay $5,000 and you know you can't. This is an example of a consent agreement, and what it will look like, it will get filled in with all of your terms if you come to an agreement with a mediator present. Let's say the worst happens and either you don't file an answer or you lose in court. Then the judge will tell you that a writ will issue within 7 days. When a writ of possession issues, right? So the landlord can file an application to execute that writ of possession. You as the tenant will not get notice when and if your landlord files that application. You just have to keep checking the court rolls to see when it happens. Once that writ application is granted, then the marshal or the sheriff can come and remove your tenant, the belongings at any time. Now, if the landlord did accept rent after they applied for it, it can potentially be dismissed, but you won't know they've applied for it unless you check Fulton County Magistrate Court public records. So be diligent about all of these things and try to get as much in writing as possible. If you decide to appeal the magistrate court's decision, we highly recommend that you speak with an attorney before deciding to file an appeal. You will only have 7 days from the judgment to file the appeal. You can appeal in either the state court or the superior court. And the judge may put into their judgment that you have to pay all of your past due rent and future rent into the court if you want to stay on the property while they're deciding your appeal. You do not have the right to an appeal if you neither filed an answer or didn't appear in court for your hearing. So be very diligent about trying to file your answer and appear in court. So the next section we're going to talk about briefly is assistance.
And before we get to that, we have some more poll questions, of course, and I hope everybody else is excited about these poll questions as I am. I'm going to launch the first one. Shonda was served with an eviction through tack and mail service. This was the first time Shonda was notified that she could be evicted. Does Shonda have a defense against her eviction? Yes or no? We'll give it a few more seconds. Maybe it's a tricky question. Okay, give it about 5 more seconds. Okay, ending. I'm going to share the results. So most people said yes, Shonda does have a defense, and there are a few people who said no. Shonda does have a defense because a landlord must make a demand for possession before they file the dispossessory. There's no evidence that a demand for possession was made, and Shonda even said that she was never notified that she could be evicted. So the answer is yes, she does have a defense because there was never a notice or a demand for possession of the property. Okay, we have another question. Let's see. And this goes back. Can a landlord legally evict a tenant from the property before April 1st, 2021? We'll give it about 15 more seconds. Okay, about 5 more seconds. This is a close one, by the way. It's interesting. Okay, let me share this. Okay, so have you said yes? Have you said no? The answer is yes, because remember, the CDC declaration only protects tenants who are being evicted for non-payment of rent. So you see, I didn't put can a landlord evict for non-payment of rent prior to April 1st, 2021. A landlord can still evict a tenant from a property for other reasons outside of non-payment of rent. Okay, and I think we have one more question. Watch it. Jimmy, a tenant, lost at his eviction hearing and a writ of possession was issued. How much time does Jimmy have to move his personal items out of the property before sheriff arrives and removes his items? Okay, we'll give it like 5 more seconds. Okay, let's share these. Okay, so we know, we see most people set 7 days. Yes, Jimmy does have 7 days. He may have a little bit more than 7 days, but he has at least 7 days to move his stuff out of the property. Jimmy doesn't have 48 hours because that would be too fast, and the law allows for a little bit more time than that. And the sheriff can come and remove Jimmy's personal items for the property if a writ of possession is issued and he hasn't moved by the time the sheriff comes. And I said that was the last question, but I think we actually have one more. And during mediation, Rita's landlord offers her opportunity to enter into a consent agreement to pay back rent. The consent agreement requires that Rita pay $600 a week until she can catch up, approximately 12 weeks. Should Rita sign this consent agreement? We'll give it 5 more seconds. Okay, sharing the results. Most people said no, and we know a couple of people said yes. Rita shouldn't sign this agreement. We've seen this a lot where people like Rita get into consent agreements that they can't afford. Imagine how much that is. That's $600 a week, which means in a month, that's what, $2,400 in a month, which is a lot of money in addition to her ongoing rent obligation. So even though she's paying back rent, she still has to pay her future rent. And you don't want to sign this consent agreement just for the sake of signing it, because usually when a tenant defaults on a consent agreement, a landlord is entitled to an automatic writ of possession. So there's no more going back to court. The landlord can just apply for the writ of possession as soon as Rita defaults. That's why it's really not a good idea to get into bad consent agreements. That's the last poll, and I'll let client assistants take it away.
Hey everyone, I know a lot of information has been relayed to you so far. So basically in terms of community assistance, the most important information to know right now is that, so for those who may or may not know, the first round of assistance that was administered by United Way in the city of Atlanta for rental assistance was funded last year by the CARES Act, right? Towards the end of the Trump presidency. And so that first round right now is in the process of ending and being closed out by United Way, simply because the federal government, as it's transitioning administrations and a new stimulus package is getting rolled out, new funding for rental assistance is also being rolled out. And so the second round of community assistance is currently being hashed out, the details of which. So right now, as we speak, we don't have any more information for you, although we are all awaiting further updates from United Way in the coming weeks. And as far as when the next round should begin, now these again, so no official details have been publicly announced, but we are of the understanding that it should restart come April. So basically for now, in the month of March, essentially, the funding is on pause. So somebody had asked a question about they had previously applied and received assistance and were recertifying for an additional month of rental assistance and had not yet heard from their agency. And so this is essentially the reason why. So this goes the same for those who have already applied in the first round and would like to recertify, or for those who would like to apply for the first time. The same goes for both parties. Just a wait for further updates from United Way and the City of Atlanta for additional funding in the month of April. I don't know, Tosin, if there's anything else you wanted to add.
You basically covered it. You honestly covered it. We just don't know the details as of now, but there is going to be another program that rolls out.
And so we also have a smaller, older program called the Diversion Program that is designed for those who have a writ, an eviction case currently pending against them, and who also have concrete plans to move into a new apartment. This diversion program provides assistance for the security deposit, and also I think utility bills as well, just to shore up people's ability to secure new housing if they are being evicted. Now, those who qualify must live in certain areas of the city, mostly MPUV, parts of the south side, and then Southwest Atlanta. But there are additional details for that program as well on ablf.org, our website, and also feel free to stay tuned to updates on our website and other communication platforms for the next round of assistance via United Way in the City of Atlanta.
Once I get the green light from my friends at ABLF, I will also let all of you know when that opens up as well. And just to respond to a question in the Q&A, this is being recorded, and we'll have it on our website at beltline.org afterwards. So please make sure you share this information with anyone that you think could use it.
And let me add as well, just along the lines of assistance, continue to reach out to the organizations in your community. They also get assistance funds, but on a rolling basis. And sometimes when those funds run out, that's when they are unable to help, but it then re-ups. So other organizations like Midtown Assistance Buckhead, I forgot the name of the exact organization, but there are several organizations all over the city of Atlanta that are working to try to assist with things like rental assistance, utility assistance, sometimes helping you pay your back rent so you don't get evicted, or as Patricio mentioned, paying rent at another place, paying the security deposit for another place. Or if you are in subsidized housing, we do know that if the utilities get shut off, that is grounds for eviction. So we also have some funds to assist with that. But again, reach out to the community organizations in your communities and see if they have a pool of assistance that they can then help you with. In addition to keeping any money that you can to pay towards back rent, because sometimes having money in hand allows the landlord to feel better about negotiating with you, that you are good for that money. I'm looking at the time, and I just wanted to make sure that if there were any, anyone else wanted to say any of my other coworkers wanted to chime in or say anything else, or if there were additional questions that participants had before we ended for the night. I see one question about why was there not a bridge fund in place by United Way or SOAR or Community Foundation to complete pledges for those promised payments. United Way and the Community Foundation have a ton of money. Those are things that you absolutely need to stay on your congressmen and your representatives about, because those are things that they can, those are laws, those are legislative actions that they can put in place as supports for their community. Find out who your councilmen are, find out who your state representatives are, and let them know you are not satisfied with the way that this has been handled. We've been in this pandemic for a year now, and although it took everyone by surprise, after a year, there should be more supports in place. And so definitely, this is the time to be locally, politically active and let your voice be heard. Or run for office. That would be great. I see one more question. What is the best approach for someone who is refusing to help, who owes $10,000 or more despite several attempts to help from the landlord? I'm trying to understand the question. So the tenant is refusing to help themselves. there are always remedies for landlords. You can't force someone to take action. You can let them know what resources you've learned about that they can then apply for. And if you are feeling so inclined, you can assist them. Sometimes the paperwork is overwhelming, but absolutely let them know what you've learned here tonight about the assistance programs and encourage them and let them know you're open to working with them. There were a few programs that were working specifically with landlords, including Star C. I don't know if those funds are still available, but Star C is an organization that is, as if you are a landlord, you might want to reach out to and let them know you're willing to participate in their program if they still have it available. All right.
And there's one more question from Edwin McDonald. He said, is there training for agencies to assist in rental counseling and homeless prevention? I'm not aware of like that training. Do you know anything, Ayanna? Or
Reach out. Yes, I would reach out to Partners for Home and also Gateway, which is run is one of the city's homeless shelters. They are always looking for assistance, and they, I believe, may be able to put you in touch with some training opportunities for what you're asking for. So Gateway, the Continuum of Care, City of Atlanta homeless organizations, they may be able to put you in touch to get the training that you're looking for.
So that's a great place to wrap up. I just want to say thank you to all of our presenters tonight for that great information. Like I said, you will get this recording. Please share it with those that could use it or that you think can share it with people that need these resources. As soon as we have an update from the CDC, if there's an extension or on funding resources, we will let you know. And with that, thank you again for your time and for our presenters. And I hope everyone has a great evening and stay safe.